Hello and welcome back to Paranormal NL Podcast. PNL Podcast, located in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. I'm your host and founder, Jen Noseworthy. Thank you for tuning in to UPRN, United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in Ireland and 105.3 FM on that Gulf. You can follow UPRN on uprntalkradio.com for tonight's Crypto Guru special on UPRN segment number 65. I've got a special guest waiting backstage from Pennsylvania, USA, who I'll bring on shortly. Now, how about that Groundhog Day yesterday? What was the weather prediction for your part of the world? In Canada, we use some strange creatures like the marmot from Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Van Island Violet. And how about Lucy the lobster in Nova Scotia, Canada? Now, we also got in Ontario, Wharton Willie. He's the most famous Canadian groundhog, but he's an albino groundhog. So other creatures used for Groundhog Day predictions, like in the U.S., are armadillos, squirrels, ducks, owls, beavers, alligators, and even chickens. Cool stuff. Now, it's time to grab your favorite cryptid creature drink, a few creature comfort munchies, and get ready for the Crypto Guru Show tonight. Paranormal NL Podcast is sponsored by the Bog Team. It's a boots-on-the-ground Bog Team doing historical paranormal investigations in Newfoundland, Canada. Smash those subscribe buttons and grab your PNL Podcast and Bog Team merch at TeePublic on their Linktree, Paranormal NL Podcast. All Bog Team music heard in the intro and exit is available for download and use on all social media and streaming music platforms like Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Apple Music, DistroKid, and YouTube. Watch PNL Podcast every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on UPRN. PNL Podcast believes in supporting international paranormal networking and highlighting global paranormal people, places, and things. Now, let's get on with the show tonight. I have on with me a special guest. He's a PNL Podcast Alumni-Network Member who was on PNL Podcast before in Season 2, Episode 11, in 2024. And that was way before PNL joined UPRN, and I was just doing radio shows, and way before PNL even created our own YouTube channel. Now, I'm going to bring him on stage and say a few words about him. Here he is, Mr. Ronald Murphy. Welcome, Ron.
I am flattered to be here, and I actually get to see you now in virtual reality. But yeah, this is great. This is awesome.
Woohoo! So Ron Murphy is an author, a folklorist, a paranormal investigator, an ordained minister. He's a TV, radio, and a podcast personality, a speaker, and a cryptozoologist known as the Crypto Guru. So Ron, you want to talk a little bit more about yourself to the folks who haven't met you before on UPRN? Because this is your first time on UPRN with PNL.
It is my first time, and like I said, I'm flattered to be here. But before we go any further, I think we have to mention, I think that you left out Punxsutawney Phil as the prognosticator of prognosticators, right? Because without Punxsutawney Phil telling us whenever the spring is going to be here, we wouldn't have any of that. So I am lucky that I live in Western Pennsylvania, and I'm only about an hour and a half away from Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, where Phil was kept. And if you want to go see Phil, which you can most certainly do, you can go see he and his little family that they have together. It's at the library in downtown Punxsutawney. And Phil is behind bulletproof glass, because you have to keep in mind he's a bit of a celebrity, and nobody wants to take a shot at him. You know, we don't want that to happen. But yeah, I'm glad that we're talking about this kind of stuff, because that's very interesting.
I didn't know that Phil was behind bulletproof glass. Really?
Yes, absolutely. Because these are special groundhogs, mind you. Over in England, whenever they would have Groundhog Day, hedgehogs, but we don't have hedgehogs here. But what we do is we have, the groundhog, the whistle pig, and I heard you also say about the marmot over there on the west coast of Canada. So all these little things that burrow down in the ground, apparently has some sort of internal, clockwork that advises them when it's safe to come on up and start prowling around and putting on more and more fat since their layover in hibernation. So yeah, this is a fascinating subject, and in a way, it's a bit paranormal as well too, because we are looking for the animal world to provide us with some sort of indication what's going to be going on.
Yeah, you know what? I kind of put that in there as a little something to chew on because I knew you were going to bite on it.
Yeah. Afterwards, as a folklore, so I love the way people think. Yeah.
Can you kind of explain, Ron, like why for so long have we used animals for doing that?
Yeah. So going back, even to the, it was really the Romans that kind of solidified it and made it into almost, a doctrine of such, because they had these priests called haruspexes, and they would be able to tell, the future by looking at the way birds fly or by examining the entrails of certain animals. So we get the name augury. That's a term it's a little bit of an archaic term, but for something to augur well or augur ill, that comes from looking at the flight of birds, because it was said that the way birds were flying would tell you if there was good winds coming or bad winds coming. And we have the
Ron,
the broad.
You just mentioned birds. Do you know? I know we're doing a pre-recording, but we have poor little cockatoos over here in Newfoundland now. We've got so many different weird birds flying around. Ron, do you think it's because of the big CMEs that we've had this 2025 with all the electromagnetic being messed up with the bird's flight? Do you think that might be causing them?
Yeah, it's very possible, because birds rely on, this internal, system, to fly by. They rely on magnetism and all this other kind of stuff. It's amazing. So what I think is going on first and foremost is, with global warming and everything that human beings are doing, that's already putting things a little bit off kilter. But then whenever you mention things like, solar storms and all that, other things that are going on in the world as well, too, of course, that's going to mix up, any creature that relies on the environment in order to choose its course and its path.
Can you think of any cryptid creatures that would be messing with? Do you think it's messing also with the Bigfoots or the Dogmen or?
Yeah, I would think that whenever we talk about cryptids, and if we're talking about these are flesh and blood animals, and we're not talking about any kind of interdimensionality or any kind of extraterrestrial origins, if we're talking about an animal, basically, that's flesh and blood, then of course they would be susceptible to everything that will be going on in the world around them. And this will be one of the things that would do it as well, too. Now, I will tell you that here in my neck of the woods, there has been an explosion of Bigfoot sightings around Penn State University. Now, this is a major university, but it's in a very rural area. But Bigfoot sightings are taking place now almost on a daily basis. So it's very possible that there's something out there in the world that's, spurring them on to do certain types of activities that they normally do not do.
Yeah. We got to give a shout out to Rob at BMR and all the boys, and Krista and all the girls.
That's right. Yeah, they're fantastic people. I was supposed to, unfortunately, do a conference with them in Missouri. I've never met them in person either. And I was supposed to do a conference with them. Unfortunately, there was a family matter that arose. But hopefully here one of these days, because, it's so much different meeting your idols in person. And I'm really looking forward to that as well, too, here, hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, travel and stuff has gotten kind of crazy, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. Now, it wasn't really the matter of it was travel. It's more with my I was having some issues with a couple of my children, but those issues have kind of come and gone now, thank the good Lord. But things are back to a little bit normal. But yeah, absolutely. So getting back to what you had said, I think whenever you talk about creatures like Bigfoot and maybe even Dogman, in that kind of scheme of things, whenever we talk about them relying on the natural rhythm of the earth and cues from the environment around them, I think that anytime you have an animal that is migratory, and I think Bigfoot and Dogman by nature have to be necessarily migratory in order them to elude people. You'd almost have to be constantly on the move. But if they do not have any kind of sense of direction because something's throwing them off, this is what leads, in my opinion, to them crossing, paths with people, because for the most part, they like to be very elusive and very secluded. But now around, like I said again, around Penn State University, that is although it's in a rural area, the site itself is a fairly urban area. And for these creatures to be seen more and more in that perspective, then it does seem like something's throwing them off a bit.
Yeah, I got to give a shout out to Brian here in this one, Brian Bodum from Third Eye Live. This is an old show, I think, that you were in. But I think there's also Wolfman in this one. Now, Dogman versus, I guess, am I using the right terminology? Wolfman versus a werewolf. Would they be considered the same thing?
Well, so that's interesting, and I wrote an entire book on this because of all the cryptids, the first one that I really became interested in, of course, was Bigfoot. But I've always had an affinity towards Lon Chaney Jr. and the Wolfman. Right, I've always been fascinated by this particular character, and the archetype of the werewolf is something that shows up continually in cultures around the world. So to get to the genesis of what the werewolf is, basically the word wer, W-E-R, is a medieval word that means man. It means intelligence. So what we're dealing with here is a beast that has man-like intelligence. And whenever we put that kind of lens up to start reviewing throughout history what it means to be a werewolf, then I think the Dogman does in many ways follow into that particular analogy. I think that whenever you talk about a Dogman, you are essentially talking about a werewolf. You're talking about an intelligent beast. Now, the thing is, does the Dogman, transmutate? Does it go from one level of being into another? So what, is it always a Dogman, or does it become a human being as well too? And a lot of people in the field assume that the Dogman is a creature in and of itself, that it doesn't have any kind of human essence behind it. It's not transforming into a beast from a human state, and that may be the case. But as a researcher, it seems that the werewolf enigma and the Dogman enigma are so closely intertwined that you really cannot just completely rule out the possibility that the Dogman is not something that also transforms into a human being. Because whenever you look at these legends and these myths throughout history, there's always
Ron, is that what, a skin?
Yes, so that's what we're getting pretty close to. So if we would go back into the Greco-Roman world, they would have believed. It would have been no problem whatsoever to talk about these kind of things. And usually a person who would be cursed by becoming a werewolf would spend 7 years and a day in that particular curse, right? He would wander around in the shape of a wolf, and as long as while they were in that form, they did not ingest human flesh, they would, after a 7-year period, return to their shape of man, right? They would become a person again. But these ideas, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, you'd mentioned, eating flesh and stuff like that. That sounds like a vampire, right? I wonder.
Well, sure. Yeah, it's the taboos that we all, as human beings, that we're all very afraid of, right? The idea that you can you say your prayers by night, you can still transform into a monster. And that's something that's terrifying. As a kid, I remember that terrifying me very much because, you think, I'm trying to be a good person, but what you're saying is there's something in human nature that's capable of snapping and becoming a monster that you dread. And yeah, indeed, that's what it is. That is the reality behind all this kind of stuff. That at any moment, any human being out there can become something so heinous and so monstrous that they are often projected as a monster simply because we cannot admit, or we don't like to admit, that human beings are capable of such deeds.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's where you see a lot of those criminal movies on or shows on TV, right?
Oh, right. And like I said, if you look at the history of the werewolf, um, people had talked about transforming, but it was usually through some sort of witchcraft, or the devil himself would give somebody, a belt made out of a wolf skin, and whenever the person put the belt on, they would transform, or a witch would give them some sort of salve to rub on their body, and that would transform them as well. But when we talk about the Middle Ages, we're talking about usually about people that were going around with a mental disorder that they believed they were actually transforming into an animal when actually they were just still in human form.
Right.
But we can see that there was a lot of witch trials, and there were werewolf trials as well too. At the same time that the Salem witch trials were going on here in America in 1692, and parts
Tell
of
me,
Europe there were speaking.
tell me
What's
about
that?
that. I never heard that before, that there were
Oh
werewolf
yeah.
tribes. Okay.
Yeah, oh, yeah, there was werewolf and witch trials because
Yeah.
by this time, werewolves was seen to be a part of witchcraft, right? So the
Okay.
devil made you do it. So, but yeah, so there were these great purges where they were taking up people who were claimed to be witches and be claimed to be werewolves as well too. Now, I do have a good story for you, and this is by this was a gentleman that was caught up in these purges, and his name was Thies, and he was an older gentleman. Some accounts say he was in his 80s, some say he was in his 90s, but he was captured and he was brought to trial. And as he was being questioned, the prosecutor stated, are you a werewolf? And he admitted wholeheartedly, yes, he was a werewolf. And I can only imagine that as soon as those words left his mouth, they started to build up the pyre, for the fire, and they were getting everything ready. But he said, "Hold on a second now, hold on," and he stopped them there, and he said, "I'm a werewolf, but I am a werewolf of God." This is the first time this was ever used in a
Huh.
trial as a defense. But his claim was that certain individuals on this earth are allowed to transform into a wolf by the grace of God, because what happened is one day a year, hell would open up and the witches would come out to prey upon human beings. And without the werewolves to stop that, we would be overrun by witches. So, in his defense, he was indeed a werewolf. He would transform into a wolf, but it was God's will that he did that, and in so doing, he was keeping humanity protected. So they unfortunately did not burn Thies at the stake. He was sent away with a couple of lashes. Maybe they probably whipped him about 5 times or so, and then he was sent off on his way. But at least, even at that particular time, whenever the devil was in the details everywhere, and everywhere you looked, there was something demonic going on. At least the people that were presiding over that trial found that excuse plausible enough to set him free.
Yes. Yeah, because that was a big deal then, the witch trials.
Oh my goodness gracious! Yeah, so it swept throughout Europe, and there are a lot of different calculations on how many people died in the witch trials. Conservative estimates state, maybe 100,000 people died, but I know that I've heard of some very severe statistics of maybe as possible as 3 million people had succumbed to execution in the witch trials solely over circumstantial evidence.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot of finger pointing then. Pretty sad.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Pretty sad way to do business back then. But, there was a lot of superstitions back then.
Oh, there were in the time itself. Like, okay, this is perfect because we're talking about Groundhog Day and we're talking about animals, telling us what it's going to be like for the next season. Well, that was going on at this time as well too, right? People were living a very rural type of lifestyle. This was an agricultural lifestyle, and you depended upon the world around you. And what happens in the natural world is the natural world gives and it takes away. It's very fickle. So whenever people started to see that crops weren't growing, or animals were dying, or children were being delivered stillborn, all of these things point to some sort of disruption in the natural order. And one of the things that was a hallmark of disruption in the natural order is a witch being around. So these were perfect scapegoats to kind of put the blame on and say, the reason why things aren't going well is because you are in our presence. And, the majority of these witches were women. And a lot of these women also were widows, which means that the state could legally confiscate their properties and their monies without any kind of, that's just on a legal basis, right? They didn't have to have any kind of really reason not to do that. Or they didn't even have any reason to do that. So, and that's what was going on. Now, before
Ron, isn't it funny in pop culture how popular the Disney is making witches nowadays, right?
Oh, right. So, yeah, and I don't really see any problem with that because I've always found witches very fascinating, right? There's also an element of like sexuality there that's an undercurrent as well, because these are the bad girls, right? That light bonfires and they run around naked in the woods, right? So this is like there's a natural seductive pull to witchcraft in and of itself. But here in Pennsylvania, there was a witchcraft trial. I believe it was at least 100 years before the Salem witch trials. I do believe. No, I'm sorry. No, I take that back. It was I think it was about 50 years before the Salem witch trials, maybe the 1640s. Here in Pennsylvania, whenever there was somebody that was arrested and tried as a witch, and William Penn, who we get the name Pennsylvania from, he presided over the trial. And it came to pass because this woman was believed to be cursing her neighbors and causing animals to die and such. But William Penn found her to be guilty of being a witch, but innocent of witchcraft. See, that's the thing.
Okay. Yeah, big difference.
Sure, there is. So in America, during the colonial days, you probably could get away with being a witch. The problem is whenever you start practicing witchcraft, because that involves some sort of communion with the devil himself. And that is where the problem lies, because throughout history, I don't care what part of the world you're looking for, women were required to be in a position of being wise women, not only for medicine and midwifery, but just because without women's knowledge of the plants that grow out there, the kind of natural medicine that grow out there.
I was going to say, there's also, white witches, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. But also that throws a patriarchal society on its head, doesn't it? For instance, if there was something wrong with me and I go to the local, the local healing woman, right? That usurps me going to a male doctor, right? Because what I'm saying, in essence, is I'm going to somebody that knows more than this man. And that couldn't happen, right? And we go back even into the Bible, one of the reasons why, witches were not supposed to be, allowed to live is because people would depend upon a witch's advice over the priestly class, and that destroys the whole cult of worship and all that other kind of stuff. So women have gotten a bad break throughout history, and one of the greatest travesties in the nature of womanhood is by this whole idea of witchcraft, because then you could take all your frustrations out on a woman. You could basically use them as a scapegoat for anything. Actually, even if you would cheat on your wife, you could accuse a witch of casting some sort of love spell upon you, right? So really, all of our free will is taken away, and all of our sins are now put on the shoulders of the witch. And we can see that happening, up until relatively recently, and in places like Africa and India. In the world today, there are people still being executed as witches as these kind of evangelical religions take over in rural areas of these countries.
Wow, yeah. They don't want people looking at the oracle. They want them to look at, the other stuff. But,
Right.
leading into other things like, you'd mentioned different cultures. The Fae, here in Newfoundland and Labrador, our Fae are considered evil. Other cultures think, oh, they're little happy, mushrooms and little fairies. But did you want to talk a little bit about the Fae?
Yeah. So for those folks that are from Canada, I did a few seasons for the APTN network, Red Earth Uncovered, which I feel is one of the best seasons or one of the best shows about the paranormal put out there. It's very evenly done. It comes with a skeptical nature as well too, and it's just really a cool show. And I was very honored to be a part of that. But we did a show on fairies, as a matter of fact, and so fairies throughout history. Well, there's always been a belief that there is another world there that kind of transcends ours, but also intersects ours as well too. And this goes back to really the dawning of humanity. Whenever you look at the shamans, what kind of information we can piece together from the shamanic world, we can see that there's this belief in the anima and the animus, that everything is alive around you. And from that, this idea of everything being imbued with a spirit, these spirits eventually were personified in the spirit of nature as elements, as fairies and such. But always, because they're so associated with nature, and like I said earlier, nature gives and it takes away as well too. So nature is always going to be chaotic. You can never domesticate nature; it's not possible. So fairies, as representatives of nature, represents all that wildness that comes with it.
Maybe that's why they call it a woman.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you know what? Fairies have been almost invariably depicted as feminine. If you think about that, very few times do you see a male fairy represented. And that's the way it is. Since we were talking about witches a little bit earlier, that's the way it is with mermaids as well too, and also vampires. It wasn't until relatively recently that the vampire took on a masculine disposition, because for the most part, and we're going back into very ancient Babylonian history, for the most part, vampirism was always attached to the female.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Not the male.
Yeah. So again, we go back to the Judeo-Christian sense of things. So there was a Jewish commentary on the Old Testament, on the Genesis account of creation, and in that account, Adam, his first wife was actually a character named Lilith. right? And she was not made from his rib like Eve was. She was made consubstantial with him. She was made from the same dirt that he was made from. So they are equals in creation, right? Nobody has precedent over the other one. And
Okay.
she stressed, right? She, as a character, she stressed that there was no difference in man and woman, even though Adam wanted to be the one to rule the roost.
Mhm.
And it was this kind of argument that expelled her from the Garden of Eden, right? And as she is sent out into the wastelands that surround the garden, and she's sent out solely because she disrespected her husband. So you can see where patriarchy comes into play. In the wasteland, she meets, depending upon which commentary you read, either a fallen angel or Satan himself. And out of this union, they produce children. And she is said to have taught her children because she was, um, uh, treated so poorly by Adam. And now, Adam has a new wife, that her children would now take out vengeance upon the children of Adam and Eve. And that's who we are right now. And so that's a very ancient commentary going back at least 2,000 years. And if it's part of a commentary, then it was probably an oral tradition that predates that by at least several hundred years as well. So I think that we're safe to assume that probably right around 2,000, 2,500 years, there's been this understanding that there was another wife of Adam whose lineage was producing children that would feed off of the children of man.
Wow. That's interesting. It makes me think of the Anukai and, giants and things like that. When you talk about, was it some sort of a fallen angel and, in the
absolutely, yeah. So that's we're talking about the exact same thing. So that. So the cool thing about this is there's so many different layers, right? It's like peeling an onion, right? So once we can talk about vampires, but when we take off that layer, now we see the Nephilim coming into focus as well too.
Yes.
And then we can see the ideas of, from vampirism, it goes to the idea of, cannibalism and what that means to us as well too. So you have all this stuff in this one little section of the Bible that we can talk about all the time, but it shows a much bigger picture as well too. That no matter, so a vampire is just not a vampire. And as you stated at the very beginning of the show, what is a dog man? What is a werewolf? They're ambiguous, right? They play a role in the archetypes that manifest themselves within human evolution and human culture. And they mean something to us, but they are nebulous as well too, because there's much more to them than just the title. There's much more to a vampire and much more to a werewolf than just that title.
Yes. And, we talked a little bit about mermaids. I'm fascinated with mermaids. Like, I'm on an island, so all the fishermen's lore and folklore around Newfoundland, they talk about sirens and things like that. I know you wrote a book on that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And you'll have that in any culture.
I think you're dropped a little bit, but keep talking.
Out there that looks human but isn't quite human, or maybe they are ultra human as well too. That's another thing. But Scotland has it, and even places like Africa and Australia, as far flung as those places, also have the archetype of the mermaid as well.
Yes, they are quite fascinating. And you talked about there being the male mermaid also. In Newfoundland, we have these calendars, and every year we call them the merbies, because bies are like, yes, bi, like a man, right? So
right.
The men put on the tails and they get on the calendar.
There you go. Yeah, I think that's okay. You can have that kind of stuff, sure. But like when we go back, again, we're going back into traditions that are sometimes nearly 3,000 years old. By the time the mermaid first shows up in Greek literature, it has attributes of a bird as well as a fish, but they are feminine as well too, and they will sing people to their death, right? And that's the big problem. And we know when we look at the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey, we can see Odysseus who straps himself to the main mast of his ship while his men put wax in their ears because Odysseus wants to hear what the song of the siren is. He wants to witness this. He wants to live this. But he knows that if his men hear it, they will, abandon everything and jump off the ship and go into the water. And that's the problem, right? But the problem that really kind of undercuts this whole thing is there are women out there that are trying to lure men away from the safety of their ship, the safety of land and all that stuff into
Ron,
the
I have
chaos.
to ask you, do you think that's where, because there's a really old tradition where it's very unlucky to have a woman on board of a ship?
Yeah.
And do you
Yeah.
think that that's where it comes from?
Well, I don't think that it comes from the fact of the mermaids. I think it comes from a fact is that, see, men for a long period of time, and even somewhat today now, they cannot be trusted to kind of rein in their passion, so to speak, right? And a woman is going to be a temptress, and you can imagine one woman on a ship of 100 men. Soon there will be some problems, right? People will be fighting with each other and everything like that. So really, what the mermaid and what the woman illustrates to us as we look at the folklore is that men again are blaming women because we cannot control our natural appetites, right? That we want to be able to go out there and experience all these kind of things without any kind of recourse to punishment. And you think about this too, these sailors that leave for months at a time or years at a time, they're leaving their families behind and they're going out into a whole other world. And it's kind of like Vegas. What happens at sea stays at sea. Nobody's going to be saying anything. And to think that women was, occupying a lot of their free time, I think is really, I think that's, absolutely true. They probably, people were seeing women everywhere, and people think that the manatee actually represented the origin of the mermaid, although I don't find that very appealing of an argument. But people thought that even the manatee, that tends to be a rather ugly creature, inspired people because they were seeing women everywhere because they were lacking, this kind of female companionship.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess that leads us into another aquatic creature you wrote a book about. Did you want to talk about this one?
Well, sure, yeah, and so this is my aquatic monsters of the Great Lakes, and I was lucky enough that I started this book probably about 7 years ago. Whenever I was in Sault Ste. Marie in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and the conference that I was attending was on a Cree Native American reservation.
Oh,
And it
nice.
was talking to the folks there. Yeah, it was talking to the folks there that really sparked my interest in writing a book because they were coming up and telling me, because this is where at Sault Ste. Marie, this is where Lake Michigan and Lake Superior come together. And they were telling me, hey, did you hear about this story? Or, whenever I was a kid, I heard that this happened. So it was through talking to these folks about their culture and some of their legends that I found it's so very fascinating that I had to write a book. So I got to visit, all the Great Lakes. and I got to interview people around there and look at the topography and really get into the biology of these lakes. And it's utterly fascinating. But every Great Lake has a different legend attached to it.
I was
Lake
just going to say, we don't have a Great Lake here, but we do have a lake, and we've got Cressy, and there's a big, outside the lake, there's a big billboard and life-size thing of Cressy. It looks like Nessie, right? But it's supposed to be a big eel or something.
That's right. Yeah, in Lake Erie, which is the lake that borders my state, we have Bessie up there. So yeah, they all have these kind of cute little names, but invariably they look like a plesiosaur, or I guess you could say it was like some sort of undulating sea serpent as well, in many reports. But it's interesting to think that if you look at this from a purely bipartisan manner, if you will, all these lakes fit into a region on the map where it's not too hot, not too cold. So they're kind of in that Goldilocks zone on the map. We have a few lakes that, are a little bit up there north that may have a sea monster, but all these other ones that we're talking about sit in this one particular zone. And most all these lakes too were created after the last ice age, 14,000 years ago. So it might have been something happening at that particular time. 14,000 years ago, is it possible that around the shores of the world, that there was still remnant populations of plesiosaurs? I mean, is that possible? Or maybe not even a plesiosaur, maybe an undocumented a sea creature, that we had not even noticed yet in the fossil record. Is it possible that around our shores in North America and in Europe as well too, that whenever the glaciers melted and they carved these great grooves into the earth that allowed for seawater to come rushing in and fill up these lakes, is it possible that some unknown creature followed this water in or chased fish in there as well too? Because you have to remember, these Great Lakes were not formed overnight, right? It took time. So is it possible that 14,000 years ago our world had certain animals in it that now entered these lakes, which eventually became landlocked? I'm a theory that may happen.
I was going to say something about, I was watching a show, I can't remember what it was, but they were talking about Loch Ness and, looking for it, but they did find a very old shark down there, like a 6-gill shark or something. And he was a Greenland shark, I want to say. He was very old, right? And they thought, well, maybe that was him coming up to the surface going around. But now, out in the Great Lakes and stuff, I can't see a Greenland shark or something being in there. But you never know, because bull sharks, they can get into brackish water and stuff. Maybe somebody released something out of their fish tank or something. You just don't know, right?
Well, no, you don't know. And the thing about bull sharks is they don't even need brackish water. They can go right into fresh water. And a bull shark was actually caught outside of Alton, Illinois, which is like 900 miles away from the ocean. So we know that they are capable of going up rivers, no doubt about it. Yeah. And I would base my all my years of research and credibility on the fact that I am positive that a bull shark has entered the Great Lakes before, without a doubt. Now, I will tell you, this is an interesting thing. In Lake Michigan, in 1955, there was an attack on a young boy that was labeled a shark attack in Lake Michigan. Okay. Yeah. So there's a accountability research group out there that keeps track of shark attacks, and they have that listed in 1955 on the shores of Lake Michigan. Now, as I research this story more and more, it could have been something other than a shark. It could have been, a huge pike,
Well,
a musky.
there's been lots of people who release stuff from their fish tank when the fish get too big. They just let them go,
Sure, that's right.
I
That's
had
right.
friends
That's right.
who did that. And, all kinds of weird fish that outgrew the tank and were like, I don't know what to do with it. Let's just go put it in this
Just let
pond.
it go. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. So I mean, I think that happens like in Pennsylvania every now and then. Like in the summer times, people find alligators swimming around in ponds and lakes and rivers because people don't know what to do with a 6 foot alligator, so they let them loose.
Right? Yeah.
And over the summer, I took my kids down to the Everglades, and we
Okay.
did some cool research down there. And there are alligators all over the place, and they're very stealthy. And sometimes you don't know they're there until you come upon them. So
Oh, I know.
they have
I almost walked on a few.
yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of those kind of things. Yeah, I love the idea that there are still those kind of predators out there. It keeps us honest when we go out into the wilderness.
Yeah. I mean, especially when it comes to places that you're not familiar with. I mean, I remember I was walking on a beach one time in South Texas. It was Boca Chica Beach, actually. It was Elon Musk's beach before he built all that stuff down there.
Wow.
And I heard the shaking, right? And I was like, God, I never thought about what it was. Never even thought that it could be a rattlesnake. And then
That's
I
right.
walked past again on the way back because like you have to cross over. Basically, you're walking into Mexico. You're just walking on the beach, right? But oh my gosh, and I was watching a program on TV, saw the thing, heard the noise. I was like, that's the noise. I couldn't see it anywhere though. It was very well hidden.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because 2 summers ago, my kids they went on a hike without me, right? So I've tried to instill in them since they've been really little to not only enjoy the outdoors, but be a steward for the outdoors as well, too. That there's responsibility in having wild places. But as they were out on their little hike together, they actually came across a rattlesnake. And as a dad, I was, of course, a little bit fearful that what might have transpired, but also I had great faith in my kids that, I raised them right, and they simply knew to respect it and give it space, but they got to experience of that. And I'm glad that they did. They actually got to experience a venomous snake in its natural habitat. And it actually did, it did rattle. So they did startle it, but nobody got hurt. The snake lived and went on its little snake way. And that's something, that they can live with for the rest of their lives.
Thank goodness, right? Hey, I got to give a shout out here to Eric Freeman Sims and Ken. And it looks like I can't see from over here. It looks like Dave from Goblin Con. That was this year, right?
That was, yeah. Just last month, as a matter of fact. We had a great time there. I really enjoyed everything there. And hopefully they asked me to come again. I really enjoy going to these events because I get to talk to people, right? I get to talk to people from all over the country.
You do.
And as a researcher and as a folklorist, I get to hear amazing stories.
Yeah. I mean, you do a lot of different public speaking. You're also have your tour, and you do weddings. Now, I think you've got another book or something coming out, or you had a little bit of a collab with this gentleman.
Yes. I actually, he interviewed me for his One to Go book, and that has been published by Small Town Monsters, which they also published my Lights in the Mist book as well, too. A great organization. But yeah, Jason does amazing work. And if you want to get a great read on the Wendigo, this is the one to do.
There you go. Now, I also wanted you to talk about your other episode when you were with Beyond Skinwalker.
Oh, yes. So I was out on a research expedition with Small Town Monsters, as a matter of fact, filming Sasquatch Unearthed the Ridge, which was, I believe, an 8-episode series that I was lucky enough to be a part of. And as we were out there doing investigations, for Bigfoot, banging on trees and doing the whoops and everything that looks good on video, we start hearing something that sounds like wind chime, right? We hear something in the environment that sounds like some sort of tinkling sound going on, and we'd never experienced that before. And then shortly after that, these orbs of light emanated, and then they began to seemingly evaluate why we were there. And that's really led me down this whole new path because I wanted to know what was going on. So I wrote a book about it. And then I started to find out that other people have this kind of experience as well, too. Not only with the lights, but also with this sound, as if there is a certain frequency to these encounters, right? So that has put me down a whole new rabbit hole where now I'm studying things like Reiki and energy healing as well, because I firmly believe that it's out there in the environment. And if we can witness these things, and people are witnessing these things as paranormal, then it's very possible that we can also tap into that. And people may have been doing it for thousands of years, especially in Eastern philosophy. So that has taken me down a whole new road. But to get back to your question about Skinwalker Ranch, they set up, thousands of dollars worth of equipment in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and they were able to replicate the sounds that I were hearing by amplifying the environmental noise that was going on. So it really kind of freaked me out, but it also validated to me that there are things out there in nature that can be scientifically proven, but not explained away.
Yes, and the frequencies, I think, are a huge thing. The ancient times, they knew about the frequencies and how to unlock them. And it only seems like we're on the very, tip on the edge of learning how to do all this stuff.
Right. Well, I think that we always had the knowledge, but as we became more and more, right, exactly. Yeah. We became cultured, we became civilized. And as soon as we started to put up walls, and as soon as we started to look out our windows and look at nature as the other, and that we were no longer part of it, then that heritage of ours, that belonging to the natural world, has been lost. And it may be lost forever unless we willingly return to that vibration, right? The frequency is still going on out there, but we've elected to step away from it.
Yes, 100% agreed. Yeah, we gotta learn how to do it all over again, Ron.
Well, my one friend, Anne Celine, who I do a lot of conferences with as well too, and we're collaborating a lot of things. She has this great definition of the great forgetting, where we as humanity have forgotten so much. And I think that it's time now that we, especially in the paranormal field, because a lot of people in the mainstream's not doing this, but I think that we have to come about and go through a great remembering on what is out there to us, right? Instead of looking at the natural world as a commodity, let's look at it as we're in this symbiotic relationship with it. And if it survives, we survive.
I totally agree with that, because there's some weird stuff going down right now. I know we talked a lot about cryptids and things like that, but what's your take on the 3-eye atlas? What do you think is going to happen with that?
I know, isn't that something? So the little boy part of me is frightened as hell about this thing, right? So I am hoping that it is definitely a comet, because if it's not a comet and there is intelligent life coming here deliberately because it knows that we're here, that doesn't bode well. But I think the problem with this is that we kind of project ourselves onto anything. So we're projecting human nature onto, an alien life form, and they might be peaceful. We might be the only people in the world, in the universe, that is screwed up, right? We might be the only ones. The people, there other life forms may have evolved out of warfare and hatred and all that kind of stuff. But I would assume, this is my hope, I would assume that if anything traveled those kind of distances to get here, it wouldn't be to destroy. It would be more or less as a part of diplomacy. But I think that there is going to be a time whenever things are starting to kind of like uncover themselves, right? There's going to be this great awakening, and we're going to see things in an entirely new
I
light,
think
right?
it's already starting, Ron. I totally
I
think it's
do
already
too.
starting.
I
Something's
do
going
too.
on with the Earth, the
Yep.
magnetosphere, all that stuff. But when you were talking about that, I was thinking, yeah, definitely there's something going on. But we've seen both sides. We've seen scary movies about aliens, but also we've seen benevolent stuff about aliens. And the same with ghosts. Ghosts are good, ghosts are bad. So we don't know. We're just rolling the dice. Was it because we sent out that wow signal in the space and now it's coming back and saying, hey, wow, yeah, you're here.
That's right. That's right. And remember too, we sent out that one probe as well too that
Yeah.
had like an album on there that played like music and things like that. So it's very possible that they heard some Chuck Berry and they're coming back to get some more Chuck Berry albums.
Oh, Ron, you're funny. Do you want to start giving some shout outs for your stuff or where people can reach you and how they can find you? Let me
Sure.
see. I'm going to take this off screen and put up your website while you're chatting there.
All right. Right. Yeah. So my website is ron-cryptoguru.com. You can get my books there. You can email me through there. You can get in touch with me through there. If you want me to, perform your wedding, I can do that as well too. So I got a lot of cool things going on there. Information about my tours as well that I'm going to be doing as well. So really, that's kind of like the end all and be all of who I am in the world of the cryptozoological. Now, you can also go to Amazon as well, too. And I also have social media. And before we began tonight, Jen, we talked about this link tree, which I really need to learn more about because I am on like Instagram and I'm on TikTok and I'm on Facebook and all this other kind of stuff. So you can look me up on there, Ronald Murphy Jr. I go, because there's other Ron Murphys out there. So, but if you look me up, feel free to follow me or friend request me or whatever. I love to talk about this kind of stuff. And if you have any kind of debate with me as well too, if you have another theory, I would love to hear it because that's how we learn.
No, I think we've mentioned before that, you were on a lot of different radio shows too. Do you want to give yourself some shout outs about that and your previous podcasts if people want to go back and listen to the old ones? Or
Well, yeah. So, I've done a lot of Dave Scott Spaced Out Radio. I've been on with Brian Bowden in Inside the Goblin Universe. I've done a lot of stuff with the Paranormal Peaches, with Taryn over there, the Blondes and Booze as well too, Michigan Bob, Tex out of Texas Front Porch, and Grizz over there. So a lot of people. I really do enjoy talking to people that are as passionate about this as I am. And like I said, I'm glad that I can finally now put a face to that voice. And hopefully our paths cross pretty soon.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to meet you soon, Ron. So I really appreciate you being on the show today and talking about all your crypto guru creatures. And everybody follow Ron. You can find him on the ticker down there on the screen. And I want to let you pick out some Bog Tea music. Let me see. We got rap, we got 80s, we got metal, we got country, pop. What do you want to listen to?
I have to go with the 80s.
Okay, the 80s. Let's put that on. So everybody, you're listening in on UPRN, United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and 105.3 FM out on that Gulf. And make sure y'all follow Ron Murphy. Thanks for being on the show tonight, Ron.
My pleasure.